Dear participants of the inaugural Raisina Mediterranean Forum, thank you for inviting me to address your gathering. I welcome your approach of fostering a resilient and interconnected Mediterranean community. It is indeed a crucial goal for partners to join forces to respond to global challenges on governance, sustainability, and shared prosperity. This is one of the reasons why, for the first time, we have a dedicated Commission portfolio for the Mediterranean. We want to strengthen our cooperation between the European Union and the partner countries in the southern Mediterranean and also the Gulf countries. And my mission is to bring the partners around our Mediterranean Sea closer together, also people and economies. In many areas of common interest, there are win-win opportunities, such as trade, renewable energy, digital and transport connectivity, security, or migration. In times of global uncertainty, stronger connectivity is our bridge, not only between shores, but between people, ideas, and cultural spaces. Historically, the Mediterranean region also has a strong heritage of reaching out to the wider world. In this context, let me reaffirm the European Union's strategic vision of the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, so-called IMEC. We have a lot to gain from investing in port upgrades and the decarbonization of maritime trade, strong energy transmission lines, and digital infrastructure on a wider scale. As partners around the Mediterranean and beyond, we can explore our collective potential and create mutual benefits for a prosperous and sustainable future. It is in this sense that I wish you a successful inaugural Raisina Mediterranean Forum. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to now call on stage Ambassador Rami Mortada, the Ambassador of Lebanon to the United Kingdom, to deliver his scene-setting remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be with you today. I wish to start by obviously thanking ORF and all the partners who put together this very important event, and definitely CMA, CGM, Rodolphe and Tanya Saadi for hosting us in this beautiful venue of Tangram. I think the Saadi families are very truthful to their Lebanese roots in not only connecting oceans and seas, but also connecting minds. And I think this event is about connecting minds. On the Mediterranean, I think it's very important to start by framing the region we are talking about. Clearly, it's a region with a very heterogeneous nature, with the south-north element that divides its countries between the northern shores of the Mediterranean, which are mostly EU integrated and are doing economically well, whereas the problem lies in the southern shores of in the countries of the southern shores of the Mediterranean, which are mostly in facing economic challenges. I think one of the most drastic handicaps of the Mediterranean is that there is no single multilateral format, at least well-established and efficient multilateral format that brings together all the countries of the region. Now, of course, I'm not oblivious of the EU efforts, which were the EU was pioneer in trying to bring together all the countries of that region, starting with the Barcelona process in 1995. But even before the Barcelona process, which brought together the countries of the Mediterranean, which later developed into the Union for the Mediterranean. But as you know, this is a region with many elephants in the room, if I may say so. The geopolitical difficulties that it has been witnessing has always crippled the potential for regional integration. The Union for the Mediterranean is still very active and promising at the symbolic level, because, as I said, it's one of the few, if not the only, multilateral format that brings together the countries of the region, but it's short of addressing the root causes that have been crippling this path. As for IMEC, I would say I grasp the strategic importance of this initiative, and I think events since 2023, when it was first conceived, it accentuates its necessity on one side, but on the other side, it also accentuates the need to accommodate it to the world of today, and most importantly, to the region of today. I'm referring again to the Mediterranean region. There is also a need to kind of reflect on the brand itself. It builds on a very glorious trade route, the Golden Route, and one of the pillars of ancient trade was that when you wanted your caravan to travel safely in a region, you need to make sure that all the tribes in that region, you can offer them a win-win situation. So the old rule went to if one tribe provides water, the other tribe provides food for the caravan, a third tribe provides shelter. I think this concept should be developed into what looks like a win-win situation for the countries of the region. It's also about perception. Brand is about perception, as you know, and I think the brand itself is perceived in the region as a Western, I'm not saying it's true, but at least that's the perception, as a Western-backed initiative to counter the effect of China. And we all know that to a certain extent it's true. But yet I think there is an effort needed to kind of rebrand or relook the initiative and to highlight the complementarity with other initiatives it offers rather than the rivalry. The region has been intoxicated by rivalries, and I think it's time to build something that represents a win-win for everyone. Now, something very important which was highlighted this morning by the French foreign minister, on which I totally agree, which is while we should not be overlooking these, I refer to them elephants in the room, meaning the political and geopolitical crises that have been intoxicating the region, we should actively work on their solution, because there is no sustainable regional integration effort that could succeed unless and until these root causes are addressed. At the same time, we should not be held hostage to these elephants in our room, and we should incrementally try to flag the opportunities that could exist in the region when these challenges are addressed. So I think there is a need for a hybrid approach in order to address these issues. My second remark on IMEC is how to increase its support base. I think there is enough effort to involve the private sector, and we all know that public monies will not be enough for this very ambitious project. We need to have the private sector on our side. So in terms of visibility of the initiative, there are efforts to be done. And there also should be efforts to be done by government to disburse public money to amplify the private funding that could eventually be secured. If we take the ratio of FDI to GDP, I think the Mediterranean has one of the highest ratios, which signals that it's a very much FDI-dependent region. So I think any major mega project that will need to be implemented in the region will largely depend on private investments and funding. Last but not least, since we are in an India-related event, I want to express our condolences and sympathy with the families of yesterday's crash and with the government of India and all affected countries. And my second observation on India, I also want to express our appreciation for the very important role Indian peacemakers are doing within the UNIFIL, United Nations force in South Lebanon, where they're playing a crucial role in maintaining peace and stability. And they are advancing our strategic ambition to finally find a permanent security arrangement on our southern borders. So I salute their sacrifices. And I think that's one model action, Indian action in the region. India is and can increasingly be a force for stability, a force for moderation, a force for upholding international law, international rule-based order, which unfortunately, as we're seeing, is being currently eroded. I'll stop at this and thank you, and looking forward to the discussion on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm turning it over to Tara to take this panel forward. But before, Tara, you begin, I think it would be amiss if I did not point out that Ambassador Javed Ashraf, who's on this panel and who will speak to us in a minute, was instrumental in stitching this up. So if Raisina is in Marseille, in many ways, this is the ship on which we sailed. And please join me in applauding his contribution in bringing us together with Tristan, who's here. So thank you, Ambassador. But Tara, over to you.
Thanks, Amir. Thanks to everyone for being here. I know that we're a bit late on schedule, so let me start with Michel, whom I know needs to leave. We've heard a lot since this morning and yesterday, actually, about the necessary, unavoidable contribution of the private sector in making the interconnection between trade, tech, and security in the Mediterranean a reality. This is also about jobs and opportunities for people across these regions. It is something that's very tangible. So speaking from an Airbus perspective, I'm wondering how you're seeing what Airbus's contribution can be here.
Thank you very much, Tara. Maybe first of all, I would like to thank you for this opportunity, and I would like to concur to what His Excellency mentioned. The whole Airbus family stands shoulder to shoulder with the Indian population with the crisis which has happened yesterday. We express all our sympathy and condolence to the victims of the crash, and we fully support Air India and the crew and the families. I think today I wouldn't be much challenged by saying that my humble contribution to this forum is basically bringing the corporate and the industry view into the overall picture. And where I wouldn't be challenged is on the fact that the evolving global order, everyone mentioned this in this forum, and the extremely intense geopolitical agenda that we are living since some years now has brought Europe and India closer. We have a clear, shining illustration with India, and I loved what has been mentioned earlier about don't only see what North is investing in India, but also how India is investing in North. We all remember recently the presence of Prime Minister Modi in France to co-lead the AI summit. And that's again a clear example about the role that India is playing in this ecosystem. Coming back to the industrial investment, I think in general, business and ties between Europe and India are beyond just being a market or a place where we can build the industry resilience. These business ties, they contribute into the full alignment, political alignment and closeness on how we perceive the rules-based international order, how we are engaged and committed towards democracy. This is the only way or the only environment in which big corporates like European companies like Airbus, Safran, Dassault, etc., can have long-term visions and investment appetite and plans in countries like India, which is, again, as I mentioned, it's not only a market for us, it's really a strategic partner on the long run, be it on building our own resilience with supply chain, with competencies, know-hows, resources, where we have a perfect balance in India between competitiveness and competencies. All of these contribute into properly positioning India as a strategic partner for European companies in general, and in particular for Airbus. If I can give just concrete examples, in the recent some years, under the leadership of His Excellency and many other contributors from the political sector, be it in France or in India, we have not one but two final assembly lines in India. We have not one but two pilot training centers. We are contributing into the global ecosystem of the supply chain in India by enriching and trying to use it to capitalize in our supply chain. We went in the past 5-6 years from a 500 million supply chain to 1.4 billion and reaching 2 billion in the coming 5 years. All of these are clear demonstrations that the political stability, the vision which is in India, is very propice for this kind of investment of Airbus in this in India.
Let me turn to the ambassador. Ambassador Ashraf, you just penned a piece called The Axis of Stability, where you lay out a vision for India and Europe to work more together in an uncertain world. Michel just referred right now to the political stability in India, but we're seeing actually a lot of instability in the United States, where I'm based, but also in Europe. Can you maybe explain to us how this axis of stability can help us develop the Indo-Mediterranean, which we've heard quite a bit since yesterday?
Well, first of all, to those of you who are still here in this room, heartiest congratulations and my admirations, because all we've been hearing since yesterday is IMEC. And to have survived 1.5 days of just listening to IMEC takes a lot of patience and forbearance. Now, let me tell you all that, the provenance of IMEC is highly contested. There are many claimants for its ownership. The idea actually started as a post-COVID India, UAE, Saudi initiative to develop resilient supply chains on food corridor. And then I2U2 happened, India, Israel, UAE, United States. And then the US wanted to get into this. And US wanted to get into this because it felt that it was one way to do the Abraham Accord implementation. I thought it was a bad idea to start with. But then France heard about it. They said, look, we'd like to be in this. So, of course, France is a strategic partner. We said, yes, please come in. And then, of course, you couldn't leave Italy and Germany and EU behind. We thought, well, EU has some money. Maybe they will be able to fund some of it. Why I'm saying this is because I've actually attended a meeting which was held by the United States in Delhi, where there was nobody from Middle East, and there was nobody from France. There was Italy, and there was Israel. And the reason was because President Trump had spoken about this beautiful corridor called US, Israel, Italy, and India. Since IMEC was signed, there has been no meeting at all. So every discussion we've had here is purely theoretical. No one is actually the owner of this idea at the moment. There's no coordinator. There's no private sector coordinator. There's no intergovernmental meeting that has taken place. It's been 2 years, and I can understand why. There is deep trouble and it's only going to get worse in the region that lies between India and Europe. Another issue is that we've spoken so much about the finance. You realize that it's not a greenfield project. Much of the infrastructure already exists there. And the real question should have been, what is the arrangement that would enable seamless transfer of goods from Mumbai to Marseille or to Trieste, or I would actually like to say Tangier and to Port Said and things. What would it take for that multimodal, multi-country goods transit to do that in a way that you don't have to go through customs clearance and 40 papers to be cleared? After that comes the next question, can you harmonize your standards? No, I'm saying this is because I really wanted to intervene yesterday and today to say that we needed to elevate the discussion on an important issue, but it has been lost in some very theoretical discussions. So the implementation, so we've seen in international now North-South Transit Corridor. We've seen great optimism in the past on TAPI and so many other corridors. So this is, I wanted to put a little bit of a dampener on this at this point of time, for simple reason that we need to get down to understanding what would it take in the software part, not the hardware part. That's the easy part to do. How do you harmonize standards? How do you guarantee risks? And how do you create the enabling mechanisms for actually things to happen? And you're not going to move bulk cargo on this corridor. You're still going to use, diversified things. So it's something that needs to be reflected. But I would have thought that this could have been discussions on some very important thematic issues. One of which is going to happen on the deep dive in the deep tech. Now, that's a very important area. Why is it important? It's important because if you want a multipolar world, you need a multipolar technology world and a multipolar economic world. And this is where, when I wrote about this, the title was not mine. That was Indian Express. I had a more anodyne title called A New Agenda for India and Europe. Okay, now, one of the things is that at a time when we actually see the three major powers believing they can bend the world to their will, and as a result cause chaos all around, you can actually have India and Europe, middle powers. They need the strength of diversified partnerships and the resilience of institutions to resist and to maximize their role and their gains. And this is where, countries from Europe and India with no territorial ambitions can play a role in creating a more stable multipolar world underpinned by political, economic, and technological cooperation. And when I say multilateralism, I don't simply think in terms of United Nations. Multilateralism is a state of mind. It's how you approach issues. So either you have the China's unilateral initiative, so you take it, BRI, I give it to you, or you have now the Trumpian world of coercive use of asymmetric bilateral power, right? They're using it on us, they use it on others, they'll probably not be able to use it on China. In between, and therefore, Europe and India have always approached problems from a multilateral standpoint of coalition building. International Solar Alliance, as in India, France creation, now has 100 members. Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, or what France and Costa Rica have done with regard to oceans and biodiversity, or what India and Europe are doing through connectivity partnership. So this is an approach which fundamentally relies on coalition building, participation, and stakeholding. This is not necessarily only about the United Nations, it's about approaching a problem. And I think in today's world, if we approach that problem politically, we can. Economically, I think we could do that very much. In security also. And security has two dimensions to it. The first dimension of security is operational cooperation, norm setting. And that, with France, from seabed to space, we have cooperation in every domain. And when I say seabed to space, I actually mean the most sensitive areas of cooperation. But there is also the other dimension, which I've mentioned, which is capacity building. So a rearming Europe and an India seeking self-reliance are mutually suited to be great partners. In defense, you need that industrial supply chain build-up. You ask Airbus, or you ask Safran, you ask Dassault, you ask Thales. They all are sourcing some very sensitive components from India for their supply chain. Because today, Europe needs to not just rearm itself, but it also needs to arm Ukraine. And this is the big challenge they're facing. So that's one part of it. And why Europe? I'll say this, why I'm a great advocate of cooperation with Europe, where I think Germany would need to change its export control laws. I can say for France, is that there is no other partner that is willing to do 100% transfer of technology on design, development, certification, manufacturing, on the most sensitive technologies. With the United States, you'll never get it. I could have done a PhD on US export control laws. They will never do it. So you either rely on a technology crutch and a political switch, or you work with Europe, which is far more willing to cooperate. And here again, the caveat is Germany, where it will need to change its export control laws if it wants to be a partner with us. But Spain is becoming, through Airbus. You have C-295s being done. You've just heard about the final assembly line for HS-125. You've got the fuselage of Rafale going to be made in India. This is a whole set of things. The hot section of a military jet engines, which is the most difficult technology to manufacture. Only country that has offered this is Safran from France. So this is the other part of it. In technology, and this is very important where you're going into the deep dive, the first question is, what is your philosophical convergence on this? You have three different models. You have a model that is United States model, which is essentially about major companies owning the platforms, owning data, owning control. You have China or Russia, which is state-driven. In between, you have India and Europe with a focus on more open systems, focus on public character of digital technology, whether it is AI or whether it is digital public infrastructure. So it far more mirrors the political ideals that we have than the models that the United States represents. And neither of us wants to get into this race for the largest LLMs. And then
it would not be bad for Europe to get into that race at some point, but that's another issue.
No, it won't. You don't need to, because you were talking about use cases far more than building models. At some stage, if you build 16-lane highways as Naypyidaw has done, you're not going to use it. I see only 2 cars in Naypyidaw. They have 16-lane highways, the widest roads in the world. And finally is on the economic side, where we have actually an enormous opportunity. I mean, remember, you've got the $200 billion trade already taking place with you. You've got an FTA coming. And why I like the idea of south of France, and I want to segue into what he said, is that every time I came to Marseille, I saw a gateway for India into Africa. Every time. Francophone Africa and other parts of Africa. And when we speak to, and since yesterday, we've been talking about IMEC as a European-India project, right? India-Europe corridor. There is North Africa, which is part of the Mediterranean. For India, if it was India, MENA, Europe corridor, then it's still IMEC. It means for us that if I get past the troubled regions and I enter Mediterranean, and you could speak of Mediterranean basin as the northernmost grove of palm and the northernmost grove of olive, if I enter in that area, I have a hinterland in Europe and I have a hinterland on all of Africa, connected by this closed water of Mediterranean. And this is where I think we missed the opportunity since yesterday to bring in North Africa, where India has big stakes. I think Samir mentioned this in a big way yesterday. And we have, I think, therefore, very important that we have Morocco represented over here, because Tangier will be a very, very important gateway for both Europe and for Africa. So I think politically, economically, security, and technologically, we are in a position to build a multipolar world that is the power of the middle powers being able to challenge a new world. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ambassador. Before turning to Karim and North Africa, I'd like to go to Ambre, because you did put a bit of a dampener on IMEC, and she's the IMEC person on the panel, so I feel I need to give her the opportunity to advocate for it and to present France's vision there too.
Thank you, Tara. And on behalf of Mr. Mestralez, the French Special Envoy for IMEC, I would like to thank ORF for the invitation, for choosing Marseille to host this first Raisina Mediterranean dialogue, and for all the momentum around India and France as regard to connectivity agenda. I'm also pleased to share some advancements, which has been quite recent, because the French Special Envoy actually hosted the first collective conversation around the IMEC Sherpa 10 days ago. We had quite good level of participation for India. The Joint Secretary of National Security Council participated. The Special Envoy for Italy, who is in the room, also was there. So it's true, it was a tipping point, because since the signature of the MOU in September 2023, which we are mentioning a gathering within 60 days, it took 20 months to have a kind of first collective conversation at key focal point level. Main takeaways from this conversation is that all the different countries support the implementation of IMEC despite the geopolitical context in the Middle East. They want to prioritize private sector mobilization, as we have heard, which is a key enabler for the implementation. And the feasibility study is also a key step to move forward. And as regard to this point, the participation of the European Commission, and particularly the team in charge of the Global Gateway, mentioned that they would be willing to support a part of the feasibility study in the eligible geographical perimeters. So you see a first step, a first milestone, and one additional step will be to gather again on the sideline of the Global Gateway Forum, which will be held in October in Brussels, in the same format, to start having a kind of IMEC roadmap. Second step, it was this Monday, because the President shared a summit on the more connected Mediterranean with IMEC on the agenda. It was not all the signatories, but North Africa was also part of the country invited. And we had also some statements, particularly for the private sector mobilization, which could outline a kind of methodology, which is to start by having sectorial cooperation or regional cooperation to advance on some segment of IMEC. During this meeting for Saudi Arabia was represented by the CEO of Aquapower, which is a major energy company, and they committed to create a working group to work and explore energy connectivity between the Kingdom, France, Italy, Germany, and Greece as a first step, but also to outline a framework, and this working group should gather within the next 2 months. So there is a new momentum on practical step. But as mentioned also yesterday by the Ambassador Tallo and some speakers, you also see on the political level a momentum coming also from the US, where we have heard recently that for more than 2 months, Trump administration is creating a task force to work at interagency level to tackle IMEC more as a geoeconomic project and focus on bankable project and advancing on this kind of methodology. I take the point mentioned by the ambassador is Mortada in the introduction. I don't think that in terms of financing, expecting a specific vehicle to finance IMEC is a realistic expectation. It's not. So what we see, and as you mentioned, Ambassador Ashcraft, actually more than 90% of IMEC route is based on existing infrastructure. So the main challenge will be to leverage existing infrastructure. And if you take the route from India to Marseille, it's 6,400 kilometers. And based on the recent survey that we conducted, the missing part is mainly on the Gulf, and it's 500 kilometers. So just to give a scale. So I think IMEC won't be developed in one slot. Actually, it will be by segments. You have different segments. You have an intensive cooperation between India and the Emirates, and you have sub-formats, which are not negative in itself. France, Emirates, and India around the trilateral dialogue wants to put IMEC in the agenda to make ministerial meeting, to have some advancements. And you will see, I think, different clusters around IMEC to move forward the advancements.
Thanks a lot. Karim, let me turn to you because we've talked a lot about now North Africa and what the countries of the region want. Could you tell us maybe what they want on global trade? What do they think of the future of trade?
Well, let me try to share with you what the kind of things we try to sort of engrave in our students' brain, and a bit of methodology. I think this is, if you summarize what's happening, it's a huge exogenous shock coming from the US. It's completely exogenous to all of us. And we are reacting, and you are reacting. IMEC is a reaction. France is reacting by trying to develop third-party relations everywhere around the world. But I think we might be jumping to solutions a bit too quickly. I'm not sure they are the solutions. I mean, of course, trying to address inefficiencies in trade, etc., is important. But are they strategic response? Not sure. I'm speaking to you from Morocco, Africa. Actually, South Africa is farther from Morocco than Marseille is to India, just to give you a size of things. So we have a huge agenda on the continent in terms of trade integration, optimization. But so the first message, let us be open and curious and deep dive and listen to each other a little bit more. For those who want. And I think jumping to solutions, creating foreign affairs processes, working groups, task force, communiques, it's fine. It's maybe the cyclical response. We need to have short-term responses, but let's prepare the future. And the future we need, I'm sort of inspired, we need an aggiornamento. Many things we need to discuss among ourselves. And I think that's my first message. Let us listen to each other a bit more. The second message, I think you can take it from Mr. Saad's message. In this world, you need underwriting. I don't say money, but you need underwriting. And you need deterministic approaches. Colbertism is back. Okay? You need to organize things. And the demand from the private sector is that they need protection in a highly risky and politicized world. You need protection, you need underwriting. Trust and underwriting is the most precious thing. Money will find. Ask these business people, they don't need money. You don't need the money, you find the money. I was a central banker. We create money.
Can we get some of it?
They never told you that. It's a secret. We can create as much money as we want. That's not the problem. We need underwriting. And I think IMEC should be seen as an underwriting process. We're so inefficient in terms of trade flows, etc. So I think it epitomizes the sort of the mindset of the day that we need to find a way to organize ourselves following this exogenous shock. There are countries that want to cooperate. I think it's good news. We're all moving around, quad things, just, fragmentation. A country is getting out of the trade system, but the rest of us, we want to cooperate. I think we could be a bit more efficient by sequencing the long term, the short term. What are the sort of things we need to understand and look through the same glasses? Because when you talk, and I'll conclude on that, when you ask African countries about their experience of the gone world, it's not the same. Ask Syrians, ask Libyans of the sort of, fantastic world that we are losing. Was it that fantastic for those countries? So first of all, let's try to adjust our glasses and how we see the world. What have we lost? What are the opportunities? And it's a sort of analytical introspection. sort of psychoanalysis of public policies and foreign policies that needs to happen. I'm afraid that we're jumping to solutions, although they can be fine, too quickly before doing that exercise. With those who want to do it. It has started. It has started in a bilateral way. I think the two ministers was very interesting. So your minister, Jay Shankar, did a little bit of that. He understood the French. There's a claim for autonomy, independence, etc. We look alike, the same, so we can do things together. But it has to be deeper, and I think Europe is well placed to do that exercise vis-à-vis Africa in general and vis-à-vis countries like India. Thank you.
Thanks, Karim. This is actually a perfect segue to Valbona, because you were saying we need underwriting and protection, except that Europe's world, the global order that it rests on, is currently in turmoil. It's, if the partnership that it counts on are not obsolete yet, they're certainly put to test. And so maybe in this context, you can tell us, how can global trade work? Can we think of new partnership, new ways of thinking of collective security, and if maybe the EU Global Gateway can play a role in making all of this a reality?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah, for that question. And a lot was mentioned in this panel, but also in the previous conversation. So this panel is about Mediterranean. So, of course, IMEC is one of the tools that we have in creating those new partnerships. So it's mainly about partnerships. I believe that both, and I would like to bring a little bit of U.S. perspective here too, I think both European countries and the United States have seen for a long time the Mediterranean Sea more as a route rather than a region. But things have changed with the previous, crisis in the last 10 years that we have faced. I would say starting with the financial crisis, but then with the migrant flows coming into Europe, that it was a wake-up call for the Europeans. So that is, one of the first elements. The second is trade, and it's mostly, after COVID-19, but also with, Russian invasion of Ukraine. So it was seen that the Mediterranean route is, an important trade route. And of course, economics, because as you mentioned, the global trade is in turmoil. We have increased, global trade is increasing in terms of flows and money, but what we have seen actually, it's a deglobalization or slow globalization, or better saying, fragmentation. We're living in an age where we have trade fragmentations, that we have those three main groups, the one which is led by the United States, and hopefully European Union will be part of that too, the second one by China, and the third one, those that are undecided. So I think we're looking here also with IMEC initiatives like that for more partnerships. How do we bring countries into these partnerships? Another important element when it comes to trade, it did not come with the Trump administration, is that actually new trade restrictions have tripled in the world since 2014. So it's not just the tariffs that we're hearing right now. So that has been with the non-tariff barrier. So I agree with the ambassador. I think IMEC or any other initiative, because names could change in the future, it has to be about standards, and it has to be about reducing non-tariff barriers and making it easier for the business community, because at the end of the day, the money is of the private business. It's how do you really create the conditions. So, and then I have two more elements that are important. The other one is the security element that was not mentioned here. Actually, NATO now has a southern flank strategy that was agreed at the last NATO summit in Washington, D.C. So there's a new attention to the region because of the security implications and what happened in Europe with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So there's a new wake-up call. And then the fourth element will, of course, be the geopolitical, geoeconomic, I would say, necessity also to counterweight China's Belt and Road Initiative. So in my opinion, from the European perspective, I think that IMEC or similar initiatives are geoeconomic, geopolitical necessities for the European Union. But there have to be two elements to make those work. You mentioned the Global Gateway Strategy. Before the Global Gateway Strategy, there was another strategy of the European Union connecting Europe with Eurasia. Beautiful strategy on paper, based on standards, based on institutional norms, but actually was not backed by money. So I believe, in my playbook, it's like vision without resources is just hallucination. And I think we need to really focus on, where the money should go. Is there going to be a fund there that will create the conditions for the private business to feel comfortable enough to make those kind of investments? So for the European Union, I think it's important at this stage to work together with the other partners to set the rules of the game. Because if the EU will not do that, others will do it for the EU. The second element is that we need to make the much needed, as I pointed out, investment and put the funding there. So maybe why not have an IMEC fund where we put together money from the European Union. Some money could come from the Global Gateway strategy to fund those resources and then crowd in a private investment. But also, I think also, I would like to follow up with what Ambre mentioned regarding a better coordination. I think that it's important that countries have special envoys to IMEC, but we don't have an EU envoy, as far as I know, until now.
Do you want to come in? The DG INPA is a key focal point, and now that you have new DG MENA, so they have combining, but he's the main focal point at the EU level.
It's still not clear
but it's not okay. It doesn't have the title, as it's the same in different countries, but we have key focal points. Yes.
No, so those were my points. So it's security, geopolitics, trade, economics, and also internal reasoning that has to do with the migration that was not mentioned very much here.
Thanks a lot. We have less than 6 minutes left, and I'd like to have questions. Perfect. I was going to say I want women to ask the first question, so thank you so much for pre-indulging me. Please introduce yourself, short and pointed if possible. We will end on time.
Thank you for the inclusivity and also for the interesting and valid contributions. Josiane Koutayer coming from Malta, which is an important logistics and maritime trade country, and a former member of the European Parliament. And what I wanted to bring here to the discussion, we're hearing a lot of thoughts from France, Germany, and we also had Cyprus, if I'm not mistaken, earlier on too. It's important that we hear the view of all Mediterranean countries, including smaller EU countries like Malta, which will be impacted. How will they be impacted? Because we're speaking of an important plan, because it's important to have security. But yesterday someone said, let's refer to IMEC not as a route, but as an inclusive network. And I think that is the approach forward. We need to include all important hubs within the European basin, but also the Mediterranean basin, but also the smaller countries too. What impact will it have? Because we're speaking about a framework, which is important, but what's the impact assessment there? What's the feasibility there? So we need to start from this, and then the way forward about having funds, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we take maybe 1 or 2 more questions if...
No, I just want to say just a comment. Actually, the economist in me is very happy with what Ambassador Ashraf said, because you made things very, very precise in talking about how the thinking about IMEC needs to be, better, including value added and including North Africa. So it's very consistent with what I was talking about concerning Egypt. And I want to congratulate France, very honestly, for all the efforts in trying to coordinate everybody. And I encourage the IMEC network and not corridor, because everybody needs to be in this and have harmonization for all procedures. Otherwise, we cannot talk about trade at all, really. Okay.
Inclusivity.
I didn't mention Suez Canal. Yes. There is a report that was actually published yesterday on the website of ORF and the website of ECS. We have this joint report. It's a joint effort by our 2 institutions, talking exactly about IMEC and IMEC Egypt, okay, and making the case actually for IMEC Egypt and for thinking differently about the whole thing. So, and I didn't mention the Suez Canal at all, which I adore.
It was still mentioned twice by Samir and by you, so that's good. Let me turn maybe to Ambre and Karim for involvement from countries of the South.
So during the summit on Monday for a more connected Mediterranean, you had the Prime Minister or Vice Prime Minister from several Mediterranean countries, Malta, Croatia, and Greece and Cyprus officially expressed their interest for IMEC. So we take this into consideration, although the official position somehow from the Sherpa meeting is that we first need to work on the consolidation and the kickoff of the official governance with the initial signatories. But I would say that the vision and the narrative will evolve in the coming months, and we definitely take the point to see IMEC as a network and as an addition to existing hubs such as Suez Canal. I also would like to mention here in front of Dr. Habla that President Macron went to Egypt for a state visit in March, and the official position of France as regard to Egypt is that we encourage and we will support on due time that Egypt could also join IMEC, and this is mentioned in the official press release. So if you go on the website of the Élysée, you will see this inclusiveness and this vision for shared prosperity and connectivity as regard to connectivity in the Mediterranean.
Thank you, Karim. Go ahead and we'll end with Valbona.
Yeah,
1 minute.
Maybe one last comment from my side, representing a bit the industry and the corporates. All what you have mentioned is music to my ears. Valbona, I will give you the business card of Karim. He will tell you how to find funds. But just a key point, maybe a one dimension which I'm still missing in here, which is very important to add into the equation, which is time. I hear a lot of ambitions. I hear a lot of inclusiveness. That's amazing. Phasing could be a solution. Low-hanging fruits identification could be a solution. And industries like ours, time is of an essence. Things are going at a huge pace, and we need to cope with this. Scaling with big ambitions is fantastic, but I use exactly what you have illustrated previously. If it's not proven, then it's illusions.
Well, my last comment, I would like to reiterate that the fact that the United States is involved and is optimistic about this initiative, it's very important. It's very important also for the transatlantic economic, cooperation. So that's important. And then my final point will be really this has to be team, Europe when it comes to IMEC or other initiatives, because I hear that, sometimes the entry point is Greece or is Italy or is France, depending where you stand. Each country is the entry point of IMEC. So how about really facilitating trade relations based on also a lot of deregulation, because that is what is killing the competitiveness of Europe. So let's be serious about how the EU's economy, the pie, the piece of European economy in the global economy has been shrinking over the last 3 decades. So let's be serious about what needs to be done, and soon. Thank you.
Okay, since the previous panel took 20 extra minutes or 25 extra minutes, we'll seek your indulgence. I just wanted to summarize.
Very briefly, Ambassador.
Yeah, no, I wanted to summarize some point. But before I do that, I think it's also very important to look at the security dimensions in Mediterranean. From India's standpoint, I think there's overwhelming focus on the security in the Middle East, important as it is, but it spills over into the Mediterranean. So here you have a series of problems which could actually magnify later, and the blue ocean that you sea that you see may not be that much. One, of course, on the eastern flank, you have the Turkey problem, which we haven't discussed. Turkey-Cyprus problem. You have Syria, which is not yet settled. Lebanon, Gaza. So this is one part of the picture. You have Fortress Europe. The rise of the right wing here, politics, has also meant that the schism between the southern periphery or the palm part of the Mediterranean and the olive part of the Mediterranean may actually grow. And though we are talking about ambitious trans-Mediterranean pipelines, you'll need to also bear that in mind. I see also growing implications of the tensions in the Black Sea spilling over into the Mediterranean. But also what we haven't discussed here is the growing naval presence of China in the Mediterranean. Now, unlike continental landmass, seas are one. Trouble in any one part, in any sea, anywhere in the world, has implications or the ripple effect, as it were, throughout the world. And Mediterranean is an area which connects the Euro-Atlantic with the Indo-Pacific. And you have, like the South China Sea, two very narrow gates of entry into the Mediterranean, geopolitically speaking. And therefore, we need to actually have had some more in-depth discussion during the Raisina about the future security of the Mediterranean. This cannot be taken as a given, as once upon a time, South China Sea was a very pleasant and a peaceful place. That's one part of it. But I just wanted to summarize on this aspect of, one is the underwriting part. You're actually in a world where the West or United States is neither capable nor willing to underwrite the international system. It no longer finds the international system it created attractive for itself. So it's going to renegotiate it. China is never going to be in that position to do so. So the real capacity, and this is a problem I alluded to in my opening remarks, is how do you create the mechanism that underwrites the risks of security risk, commercial risk of this entire network. I've said that in my piece also, that it is not just at root, it is a corridor of innovation and enterprise. How do you do that? But also important that we need to understand is that you are talking about 5 different things. We're talking about goods, we're talking about energy, we're talking about data, we're talking about fossil fuels, and we're talking about hydrogen. And so we're talking about services that are necessary to service this entire corridor. How do we create the necessary conditions for it needs to be discussed far more, because the hardware part of it is going to be the easiest thing. Then India-EU FTA is going to be a catalyzer. We need to also be very clear about standards and harmonization, about the enabling conditions which enable goods to move seamlessly through multiple nodes, and about the system of financing and risk mitigation of actual commerce, not so much about the infrastructure part of it. Finally, Europe has some projects going. I don't know, we didn't discuss that in greater detail, in specificity. Euromed Poseidon, which is the energy corridor, or the Euro-Asia connector, which is the electricity submarine cable. So all of these needs to see how Europe is bringing its own part, particularly at a time when it needs to finance the Ukraine war, and it also needs to finance its economic revitalization internally. Whether it sees this kind of connectivity projects as integral to Europe's own sovereignty, strategic autonomy, its own place as an independent foreign policy voice and with independent capabilities, and whether it sees this as important for its economic revitalization. All of these issues, hopefully, will be subjects that we will discuss, not just merely the theoretical dimensions of what the IMEC or the Euro-Mediterranean and Indo-Pacific connections would look like. In the long run, Middle East will solve itself at some point or the other, but some of these building blocks needs to be thought through in the discussions that they have had. But when I refer to the absence of meetings, I wasn't being a dampener or an IMEC. I mean, I've been part of it. All I was saying is that there are some real substantive issues that needed to be discussed.
Ambassador, I'm going to have to stop it there. I think you've given a lot of food for thought for agenda setting for the next Raisina Mediterranean. So that's very good. Thank you so much. Please give a round of applause to the panelists.